badly, and it may end up with the complete destruction of Europe. Europeans need to sit down and count the cost. Is it worth it? Because Russia's not seeking to conquer Europe. Russia's seeking to have its national territory respected and to not have to face every year, as has been the case for the last 16 years, of NATO and the United States conducting military exercises on the borders of Russia that are, when you're sitting there as a Russian looking at it, you see these as hostile, as intended to come after you. And given Russia's history, where they've been invaded from the West 4 times over the last 212 years, or 210 years, or 212 years, they're not sitting back ignoring that. They're taking it seriously.
Absolutely. I mean, when they look at what happened to Gaddafi, when they look at Iraq, Libya, Palestine, Syria, you know, they're like, fuck that, you know, you're not gonna pull that shit on us. And so, the thing is, it's probably gonna, the way this thing is gonna progress is gonna go proxy, conventional, nuclear. That's the way it looks. And right now we're in the proxy phase, about to go into the, proxy, conventional, nuclear. So proxy as in the U.S., you know, funding Ukraine to attack Russia, to grind down Russia, and then destabilize the government and then do a regime change operation. So we see that's not going to happen. And so the proxy piece is going to fail. The proxy attacks are going to fail. And then same with Taiwan, you know, like building up a proxy to attack, you know, or weaken an opponent and then help them replace the government with a more cooperative government. Regime change in Taiwan, in China, it's not going to work. But focusing on Ukraine right now, yeah, I mean Russia, they're not going to be able to destabilize Russia through Ukraine. So that's the proxy war aspect of it. And so then we got to look at the conventional, because you can't just go straight to nuclear. Russians already said they're not going to go straight to nuclear war. So what does that mean? Okay, what does that look like? Well, that then looks like it's going to go to a conventional war. So once the proxy fails, they're going to press them so hard until it triggers a conventional war. And the Russians already said that they are prepared either way. And like the guy Larry Johnson said, even when they trigger a conventional war, the U.S. is going to lose. What does that mean? That means all the subs, airplanes, and Russian naval vessels that are sitting in the Caribbean are going to attack. Conventional means they attack the United States. They start strafing, you know, the United States with Zircon hypersonic missiles. And that's what they're there for. So that means that we're about to go into the conventional phase. What is that? What does a conventional phase look like, you know, of World War III, right? Because it just, things don't just go from 0 to 60, right? So we're going to go from the proxy to the conventional to the nuclear phase. Okay, well, so right now we're in the proxy approaching the conventional. What is the convention? We should know, well, it's obvious what nuclear looks like. What I think is most people, particularly Americans, don't understand what a conventional war looks like. What does a conventional war look like? The conventional war looks like Russia placing assets off in the Caribbean, which is happening now, and then launching strikes on targets inside the United States. They are not immune, right? There's no doctrine that says, in the case of a conventional war in the United States, um, proper, such as then we launch nuclear weapons all over the world. And so that, I mean, I'm not sure of their nuclear doctrine, but so um, it looks like it's going to be a escalation before, and I don't think people understand that. Like Americans particularly, I don't think they don't understand the middle ground because America, the mainland, has not been attacked. Right? You had the Revolutionary War, you had the Civil Wars, and then you had Pearl Harbor, which was kind of an outlier because Hawaii sits kind of out toward Asia, and that was attacked. But the mainland of the United States has never been attacked. What a conventional war looks like is what Russia's doing right now, basically amassing military hardware in the Caribbean, and then from the Caribbean launching strikes inside the U.S. Conventional strikes, not nuclear strikes. But so what that means is, let's say um, they say, okay, it's time to strike military targets on the U.S. That means they'll probably start. They have, I believe, it's a base in Puerto Rico, right? So they'll start striking these places like in and around Puerto Rico and Florida as a warning to the U.S., right? So they may strike the Puerto Rican military base. They may strike a military base in Florida and along the Caribbean, anywhere along the Caribbean coast. So that means like Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Florida, they're all in play, right? First strike, and then they may start striking up the East Coast because they may not go um, directly after, let's say, striking Washington D.C. They may just do preliminary strikes on military targets as a warning. And the difference, but see, they have to understand like they are not scared to do it. They're not beyond that. They already labeled the U.S. an enemy combatant, enemy state, and they already said that they were ready to go into a conventional war, which the U.S. is going to lose. So more than likely, I'm thinking these drills that they're running in the Caribbean, they're probably going to go hot. If the U.S. escalates and you see U.S. hardware being used by the Nazis in Ukraine to launch strikes into Russia, they're not going to say anything. They're just going to be like, okay, we warned you. And then those drills, if it happens while they're over there with those drills, they're going to go hot and they're going to start launching strikes. So if you live in Florida, Texas, anywhere along the Caribbean, in that area, you're at risk. If you got, particularly if you have large military bases in those areas, you're probably at risk of being, hit in those strikes. And then they may go from there and work their way up. They may say, okay, if it escalates, then you got strikes on, coming in hot on Atlanta, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, D.C., and New York. So they believe the capabilities out of the Caribbean have the ability to strike anywhere along the Gulf Coast and pretty much anywhere up into New York City. Is vulnerable to strikes from the Caribbean. Not to mention they have subs that can come up the coast, that they can run up the coast and park those subs right off the coast of like Virginia or DC. And then they have first strike capability, meaning you can't, see that the problem with the Russians particularly is that you cannot shoot down the missiles that they're going to launch. You can't shoot them down. So that's the problem. So once they go hot with a conventional war against the U.S., and if they decide to start launching strikes out of the Caribbean, um, there's every launch, every strike that they launch is going to be a direct hit. That's how good they are, and that's the type of hardware they have. They have zircon hypersonic missiles. They're unstoppable and they're invisible to radar, so you won't get a warning. Like all the warnings you got from the Russians were verbal warnings. If they launch a conventional strike, God forbid a nuclear one, if they launch a conventional strikes, there will be no warnings because the hypersonics are plasma missiles. What does that mean? Plasma missiles emit, from the speed it goes, it emits a plasma shield. The plasma shield that it creates from its flight, from the energy in the flight, um, makes it invisible to radar. So you won't get a warning. Nobody can warn you, not even the government. The U.S. government can't warn you because they won't know. All you know is, I'm hit. We're hit. So it'll be boom, we're hit, boom, we're hit, boom, we're hit, boom, we're hit, right? Now you're in a conventional war. Now, because there has been no nukes launched, you got to get into a conventional war with Russia. I mean, they got these weird rules, war game rules, war rules, and so if the Russians don't launch nukes, then you can't go nuclear. That's the doctrine. That doesn't say that the Russians can't strike the United States. Do you understand? Like just because it says they can't, they don't want to go first strike with the nukes. That doesn't mean they can't strike the U.S. And that's something that people in the United States they haven't never experienced that. So they think it can't happen. They say, well, that's impossible. But like the man said, the U.S. can't win in a conventional war with Russia. They can't. They don't have first strike capabilities, particularly. And then the Russians have one of the best missile defense systems in the world. They have the S-400s, S-500s, S-300s. These things are renowned to be the best in the world at their radar systems at taking down conventional weapons. So if it's a conventional war, all bets is off. You got hypersonics flying everywhere. San Francisco, Baltimore, Virginia, New York, DC, Florida, Puerto Rico, right? They just start launching conventional weapons and you're in a war. And you say, well, it's not nuclear, but the cities in the United States are being totally decimated. And that's what's about to start. If it starts, that's how it begins. It's going to be a conventional war, and in that conventional war, the United States will be decimated. Not Hawaii, but everywhere. You see? They'll be decimated, and that's where it looks like it's going. And then at that point, once they start losing it, NATO and the U.S. start losing the conventional war to getting attacked with like hypersonic missiles. Once they feel like they're gonna lose, then that's when it'll accelerate to nuclear. And so that's kind of the phase that we're in right now. We have to wait to see if he's right. If Larry Johnson is right, then we should see some conventional activity. And then that conventional activity should, which I'm thinking within the next couple of months, you're going to see strikes on the United States, proper. You should, if it accelerates that way, if it goes into a conventional direct war with Russia, then that means they're not leaving. Their crews are not leaving in August. Between June and August, you're gonna see them demonstrate their ability on the United States, on Puerto Rico, Florida, somewhere. I don't think it'll be D.C. per se, because they didn't really strike Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine. So they may not go right in, but they may start striking outlying assets, as far as like military bases along that coast. To kind of like as a warning, and then escalate slowly. Like, okay, we hit up some of y'all military bases in the United States. Do you want to continue this, or do you want to pull your troops and weapons out of Ukraine, etc.? Right? Because I mean, that's kind of how that's going to go. So, but we'll see.